you for coming to our session. My name is Chris Grove. I'm a cybersecurity strategist at Nozomi Networks, and we do cybersecurity for industrial control systems, IoT, medical, a lot of different types of technologies, but we really started in ICS and SCADA. So I have what I think might be a unique presentation. At least I know you haven't seen this one today. So what I'm going to do is, instead of boring you with just a product demo or telling you about our company, I'm going to try to put it in context and kind of tell a story about maybe something that may happen to one of us that we would hope it doesn't. So what I want to start with is really briefly tell you about our product, and then I'm going to jump right into kind of using it and telling a story, and then I will show you live in action a demo and after these slides. So I won't kill you with PowerPoints too long. First, what we do with our product is deploy software and hardware into our customers' environments that enable us to monitor the industrial control systems. So that means not just the networks, also all of the assets, their behaviors, the firmware that might be on there, the software, how they behave, how they should behave, and the types of transactions that they've done with other assets in the environment, like stopping and starting a PLC, setting set points and parameters, and manipulating the payloads of things that are being sent to the PLCs and HMIs or from the engineering workstations. So there's a lot of different types of traffic that could happen, and what we do is specialize in interpreting those industrial protocols or IoT protocols and getting into them so that we can do things like anomaly detection and vulnerability analysis, forensics, and a bunch of other great stuff. So our product has a few different parts of it. We have what we've been known for the past few years, which is Guardian. The product used to be called SCADA Guardian, but we shortened it to just Guardian. So that's our core product. It's kind of like the brain of the operation. It does all the analysis. It can listen to traffic. It can do everything, provide a GUI. It's basically all in one. It's everything that you would need in one device for our technology. Then we can also add what's called a remote collector, and we can add a whole bunch of remote collectors, and they sort of sit out there on the network and send traffic to our Guardian device. And then we also have, for customers that have many Guardians and they need to manage a larger estate of this infrastructure, we have a central management console, and we call that a CMC. So think of that as like a manager of managers. And then this year, or last year, about a year ago, we introduced a new product in the cloud called Vantage. And that is an overlay across these other products that we currently have. So I'm going to put all this in context with a few architectural slides so you understand exactly what it is that you're looking at and why it's important, and why we think that this is a new and novel approach to cybersecurity for industrial control systems. And we also have a few other pieces that we added for customers. We have an active component where we can reach out to the network, interrogate devices, or ask questions from things like APIs or a Windows machine. We can ask it, do you have this piece of software installed, or is a USB drive plugged in? Or we can ask questions from the devices, or we can passively monitor the network to do all this. We also have a threat intelligence feed that is updated with the latest attacks that we can load into our box. We also have something called asset intelligence. And what we do is we pre-blueprint assets. So imagine if your iPhone shows up on your network, you want to know what it's supposed to behave like, not just what it's doing today, but what it's doing today. Is that normal? Does everyone else's iPhone behave like that? What about that Rockwell 1756 or the S7 400? The protocols that are running on there, are they supposed to be running on there? Is the direction correct? So we have what's called asset intelligence, which will allow us to preload blueprints of device behavior so we can tell you if it's anomalous or not before it's actually an anomaly. So we have a few different add-ons to the product that you can do to enhance it, but for the purposes of this, we're mostly going to focus on architecture and why this is really important. So first, the Guardian itself has a lot of different ways it can be deployed. So we know that in our space, there's quite a few options when it comes to ICS cybersecurity. There's a few here, as a matter of fact. There's a few that aren't, but there is a lot of common features that you'll find across the products that compete with each other. I'm not going to mention their names. If you don't know them, great. I'm not going to help you know who they are, but if you do know who they are, you'll probably sometimes be confused when you look at what everyone does and try to understand the difference, because a lot of us say the same thing. But what's important is how we do it, how we get there, how our customer can get to success using something that may sound like what everyone else is doing. So the first piece is being able to get into those nooks and crannies of the infrastructure and the networks that are hard to get to sometimes. A lot of the products, they work off a span port, and we've all been for years now configuring span ports or deploying things like Gigamons and Ixia and TAP solutions. And span ports and monitoring from mirror ports will get you a good far chunk of the way down the road. But there's going to be networks that are disconnected or more difficult to get to. Some of them aren't going to be in an IT environment. They're going to be in an OT environment. So now we need things like DIN rail mount or explosion proof. Sometimes we deploy our stuff in things that are in motion, airplanes, ships, not just factories, but there's a lot of different nuances that you'll find in what we all work with here that you will not find in IT. So being able to deploy a product into nooks and crannies is really critical. Once you get out of like the standard networking where you can just get that span off of a Cisco switch, and you have to start getting into the harder to get places, is really one of the things that Guardian does that's unique. You can see based on what we have up here as far as ways to deploy our product, we have quite a few options. From hardware, I already mentioned, we have containerized versions. We can deploy on ruggedized hardware. We have virtual cloud, etc. So if your environment is all hardware based, all behind an air gap, if that still is there, we can work with that. Or if you have embraced the cloud, or if you have one foot in the pool but one's still on land and you're not quite sure where you're going yet, we can work with that too. So we have a wide variety of different ways to deploy the product. If you think about this as like penetration deep into a network, by having the flexibility with our hardware to pretty much go anywhere, that really helps us cover a lot of ground in an environment. And this is important because it's the places where you don't cover is usually where the bad guys are going to get, or a mistake is going to happen. You don't find those spots until you need to have some visibility there, and you realize that your paper trail kind of leads up to a certain point and then drops off. And you don't want that to happen during forensics, especially during an incident. So one of the reasons that we added Vantage, which is our cloud solution to this, is to address some needs that we saw in the marketplace. That is that customers that were shopping for products, and let's say they were looking for the basics, asset inventory, vulnerability management, monitoring the network, and a few other features. There were some products that could do it, and there were some products that could do it for a little while, but then they would tip over, or you would start to run a lot of traffic through them, and something would not work right, or you try to scale it sideways and it wouldn't work, or you try to scale up, something wouldn't work. So what we did with our product first was, our first version of our product was built for a large-scale oil and gas company, and our next customer was a large-scale electric power grid company. So it's been in our DNA for a long time to be large-scale. But when it came to managing all of that, that's where it got to be a challenge for our customers, because we all know labor right now is pretty hard to find, and finding cybersecurity labor is hard to find. Finding someone that knows OT is hard to find. Now, IT, OT, cybersecurity is even harder to find, and then they're expensive, and we don't want to use that labor to go, running patch cables and deploying product. We want to use that labor to actually use the product. Rather than working on making it run, we want a driver. We need to leverage those resources better. So that's what we did with Vantage, was kind of give this overlay of the existing environment so that we can manage things a lot better, so we can scale larger. And in fact, we have an unlimited number of assets. That's the size that the box comes in. Unlimited number of assets being monitored. And the only way we can do that is by being able to go deep into the network, be able to go wide in these environments, and then be able to go multi-environment across a company that may have hundreds or thousands of facilities around the world that need monitoring. So by using Vantage, we bring a lot of this up to the cloud, and it centralizes it. So now we can work with a partner. For example, if we're working with KPMG or Accenture or a cross company or any one of our integrators, maybe it's even just somebody else from our company. We don't need to open up all of those facilities and add VPN access for all of those people to get in. All we have to do is offer them access to a single point, which is the cloud. Now we can all work around the world on the same set of data and manage this vast infrastructure of Nozomi Networks hardware out there doing stuff. And the overlay really adds a fourth tier and an added resiliency to the cybersecurity that I'll demonstrate why that's important when I get to the demo part. So just to show again kind of where Vantage lies on the top, it's sort of the 30,000 foot view. The 10,000 foot view is our CMC, which is the central management console, and then the Guardian lives down below. And then hanging off of the Guardian, we may have many remote collectors. So, you know, we've got 25, 50 remote collectors out there getting data off the network and bringing it in, delivering it to a Guardian, and that Guardian can have one or more of them attached to a CMC. So I'm just going to walk you through the layers of our tiers that we could possibly have. All the way over on the right-hand side is what I mentioned is the brain. That's the Guardian. That's the required part, the only required part. The next one over would be a two-tier architecture. That's a Guardian and a remote collector. We can also do a Guardian and a CMC as a two-tier, but we have a Guardian, a CMC, the Guardians, and the remote collectors. There's our three-tier, and by adding Vantage up there, that gives us a fourth tier. So we're the only product in the marketplace right now with a four-tier architecture, or it's called 3+ in some IT circles. But essentially, what we've done is enable you to create like these like villages of data inside your different facilities and be able to hold it back so that you don't have to centralize it. Think about if you have 10 facilities and you want to centralize your data, you got to pick one that you're going to hold all that data in. Maybe it's the headquarters. So we're going to take 10 facilities and dump all that to the headquarters. Try to do that for all of your network traffic because everything needs to be inspected. That's in all the back-end networks. That's all the HMI to PLC traffic. That is everything from the MES out. That's all of that. That's a lot of traffic to try to bring it out of your front door and send it into headquarters. So if you don't work really closely with the IT team in headquarters and you just start sending that data, they're going to probably call eventually and say, please stop. I don't know what to do with all this. So we take that off your hands by moving it to the cloud. So now I can have 1,000 facilities out there all dumping to the cloud, and it makes it really easy for me to manage. I don't have to do licensing. I don't have to do any updates. I don't have to do anything. It's 100% fully automated. It's infrastructureless. So I can start with this Vantage piece and just drop in these monitoring solutions where I need them, and I don't have to log into the individual ones to install patches, to upgrades, threat intelligence, or anything. And I can do everything from this very high level. This is just another example showing where we would plug our devices in a typical industrial network. You can see down in the bottom left, there's an example of a Guardian. Next one over is using the remote collector. And it's you can have many going up. And then you can see this is kind of displayed using the Purdue model, but we can arrange these any which way that need to be. You don't have to use the remote collectors on level 1 or 2 or anything. So there are some key places that you do want to be. For example, any inter-level traffic, you want to make sure you're monitoring those as best you can. And if you can drop the remote collectors in as close to the protected asset as possible, that means we're going to get the most traffic that's targeting that asset. You don't necessarily want to watch just the front door because not all the risks come in through the front door. We've seen risks hop around air gaps. We've seen people, our trusted employees, bring risks in on USB keys. They get mailed in, people get phished. There's a lot of things out there that don't always come through a firewall or a connection to another place. So we want to make sure we monitor as much as we can. And that really gets to be a lot of data, and not just a lot of data, it's a lot of infrastructure to manage. I mean, that's potentially hundreds of remote collectors out there. We have customers with millions of assets that have 400 and 500 pieces of our infrastructure running around the world. That's just a lot. It doesn't matter how great your product is and how smooth it runs. That is a lot of infrastructure to sustain. So what we did was pretty much eliminate that out of the equation by making that a lot easier to do and fully automated from the cloud. So the customer could still, you guys could still do everything the way we did it in the past, which is I'm going to do my best to be air-gapped, or maybe I still am air-gapped, and I'm going to deploy everything on-prem, but then I have these other networks, like maybe my building management system, maybe some of the IT network, the IoT stuff. That's not as air-gapped. So I might attack that a little bit differently with how I deploy our product. So it really enables you to get a lot of scale and get all that stuff into a good place that's manageable. And like I said, by enabling your cybersecurity people or your skilled people that know what they're doing to actually do the stuff that's important rather than worrying about running the product, you're going to get a lot more out of the product, and you're going to get a lot more out of those resources. So let's just start our storyline for a second. It's if you work at all with anything operational, you know every horror story starts with a Sunday morning where you're home relaxing and you're thinking you're off work and drinking your coffee, reading the paper, your phone rings. And that's the beginning of your story, is something bad's happening at the plant. You don't know what yet. All you know is that something's hitting the fan, literally, and you got to drop your coffee and go log in and see what's going on. So what you do first is you hop on your VPN, and this is a screenshot of the CMC that I mentioned. This is the manager of managers. And this is in my factory, in my sandbox here. And let's say I log in, and I right on the screen there, I can see I got a problem right there in Orlando. There's a lot of alerts there I need to look at. And I can see, I mean, some of my other stuff looks good. That's the typical amount of assets that I think I should have. But there's definitely something to look out there I shouldn't have read. So notice in the top left where it says CMC, I'm going to jump now one layer down in the infrastructure to my Guardian. And this Guardian shows me, oh, wow, look, alerts over time. Check that out. It just started a few minutes ago. In fact, 8 minutes ago, this facility came under attack. I got a slew of alerts here. I got 9 attempted links to the internet, 178 open vulnerabilities, but they're not new. I knew about those a long time. Not a big deal in my multi-homed asset. I got 54 types of technology. 57 assets are governing my process. That's weird because I should have 56. I know that because I look at this every single day. This is what I come into every day at work, and I look at this. So I know something's weird going on today. Something's not right. And so I'm looking at my Guardian, and I'm thinking, man, I should probably dig a little bit deeper. Let's take a look at those alerts. What's going on here? That looks pretty bad. First thing I can see starting at the top of the screen is there's somebody failing a whole bunch of logins. I can see that there's some brute force attacks on my FTP server. That's weird because my FTP server is not even exposed to the internet. So this is how I get code off to my code repository for my PLCs. So I know that there's a problem there because that's behind my firewall. This is something on the inside. I'm also seeing some SYN flooding. Might need to call my IT guy for that one because it's more related to the network. But the one below that, IT guy can't help me with that. This is where, sorry, I'm trying to get my mouse visible there. This one right here. Are you able to see this? Okay, more or less. I wish, let's see, I don't think I could zoom that display in, but when I get to the GUI, I will be able to display that a little bit. Let me try. Hold on. No, that doesn't zoom, sorry. The GUI will be clear. So this one is not something I can get help from the IT department from. This is an OT protocol packet injection in the Goose protocol. So I probably need to go and take a look at something to do with my power plant, if I have that in my factory. Also noticed some protocol errors. I think that's the IEC 104 protocol. So I got a lot of stuff to look at here. There's definitely somebody tampering with my system, and they're moving laterally. They're trying to. I don't know what they're trying to do yet, but there's definitely something going on there. So I'm actually responsible for more than just this one factory. So I got to kind of make sure that everything else, because we have 1,000 factories around the world with this company, my private company. That's why I'm here today. So I'm going to dig in a little deeper to my alerts, and I can see I've got a lot of protocol errors. Somebody's been tampering with different protocols, and that definitely looks like reconnaissance activity. including the TCP port scanning that's, you can't read it, but it's there, trust me. So someone's using Nmap in this environment, meaning they're scanning, looking for open ports. Then they're also tampering with OT protocols. So I know this attacker isn't just any attacker. It's not somebody coming in from anonymous. It's not just your typical attackers, because those guys don't know how to tamper with OT protocols. Most likely, this is going to be someone with a higher level of skill set where I've been targeted, or my sector has been targeted, or it's going to be something at the nation state level. Most of the attacks that actually touched OT systems are not your common run-of-the-mill, easy to deal with hackers. Most of them have been backed by Russia, China, Iran, and other nation states. So I'm going to definitely want to take a look at this. So I pull up the network map here, and I'll show you this in motion live when we get to that live part. And I'll start to look around here and look at the way that my assets are and the communications. I'll look at this every day, so I know exactly what this is supposed to look like. Kind of like when you pull it into your garage. You know that the way things are arranged, you don't have to check it, but you know if somebody rearranged your garage while you were out of there. So same thing. I know if somebody rearranged this garage because I'm pretty familiar with the way my network looks. But I got to look at my other plant here. So I'm going to take a look at now. If you look, I'm at a different Guardian. Okay, this is another IP address up there. It's .121 instead of .120. So I'm at another Guardian now, looking at 823 assets, and I got the same graph over here that is kind of worrisome. An attack just started 13 minutes ago on this Guardian as well. So now I have two factories now where I have a problem. I got 112 attempted links to the internet, 277 open vulnerabilities that I already knew about, and then I'm going to go in and start taking a look at my network here and start to drill down and take a look and start to see things that may not be right. If I could zoom in there, I would be able to show you something, but I'll save that for the next session. So the graph that we have in our product has like 100 different ways to look at the network traffic. I can look at it by asset to asset and then the communications, or I can look at it by type of assets. So I can gather all my HMIs and all my PLCs and put them in like a bucket, and then I can see the interconnects between them. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of them, but now what about the video camera system? If I put all them into a bucket, there shouldn't be any communications from a video camera system to my HMI. So if I see a line drawn between the two of those, then I know there's something to look at there. And by grouping things in role, like if it's a producer or a consumer, whether it's a PLC or a camera or a printer, I can view things different ways and find things that I may not have otherwise been able to find so easily. But true to Florida, when it rains, it pours. And this is like a real Florida rainstorm. We get these like every afternoon in the summer. When it rains, it pours. And I'm working on this, and I just went blank. My VPN connection went down. I lost connection to both of my factories. What is going on right now? What do we do? Like, really, what would we do right now if that's what we were in the middle of looking at a very sophisticated cyber attack, and I just lost every communication to my company, to both factories? I called them, and they're having the same problem, even though they're not in Florida. So I'll get to this one last. What we're going to do is jump into now why, one of the reasons that we, if I can figure out how to alt-tab, one of the reasons that we put, by the way, that was a great answer. I would have totally taken that on the IT side. This is one of the reasons that we put Vantage together for our customers, was to help address this. So I'm back up and running already. All I did was I logged into the cloud, and I'm looking now at a combination of all the factories in one spot. So I can go in here. I have my data at two places. I've got it in the cloud and on-prem. So when my front door went down on the factories and I can no longer access them, I can come up here now and continue to do forensics. And now I can actually call 911. I can call my buddy over at Accenture. I can call the guys that help me with this piece and that piece, and we can all work together in one screen, one console on this stuff together. And probably my SOC, well, my SOC operators would already have access to this. We would already probably have been here in the beginning and started here instead of going down. But so here you can see I have all my assets. I'm logged into a web console now. I'm no longer logged into a local lab. These are my local lab environments. You can see I lost my VPN connection, so I can no longer reach those guys. And I can see right here, here's everything in one system. So before I jump into this, this environment I just put together like in the last 3 or 4 days, but we do have customers with millions of assets being monitored. So I'm showing you just a very small sliver of what the cloud product is capable of, but you can imagine it with a lot of assets in there. So at a top level, I can just take a look. See, I have 4 sensors currently in Florida. And let me just make sure, see if they're okay. I can see that everything has been online, okay. So let's just start looking at at the alerts. So I can see right off the bat, I have 512 alerts. That's like a combination of a few different environments. By the way, if I was an MSSP, a managed service provider, let's say I am an Accenture or I'm an IBM, and I want to work with 10 of you, we could do that here too. Notice that on the top right it says Fuel Incorporated. As soon as I leave here and I put on a different color hat, I'll switch this over to Power Incorporated, and I'll be in a whole different company, a whole different story. And then I go to a different place, and I can go to Acme Manufacturing, and a whole different story. So I can, with the same console, manage and work with multiple companies if I want. But if you're the customer of it for your company, you can choose to use this for test, dev, production. You could use it for East Coast, West Coast. You could not use it at all. You can divide it up however you like, but we're going to stick in the Fuel Incorporated here. And you can see I have a lot of alerts to look at, all of them in Florida. Quite a bit of things going on with the process time. And I am worried about these IEC 104 protocol issues because that does control my power plant at my factory, and not having power could explain why a VPN and a firewall would go down together. So I also see some Modbus stuff. So this is definitely some interesting things to look at. So I'm going to click on that button to get my alerts console, and you can see that everything is available here that I was showing you in those other consoles, and I promised I would zoom in and make it a little bit easier to read. Sorry. Is that better in the back row? So what we also do is group together alerts so that we can tell a story. It's one thing to chronologically display them, but when you look at things that have similarities, you can put them together and create an event out of it. Like right here, there's 2 alerts together in this batch. So let me click on this, and I have at the top here a description of what happened and what can I do. And I can also use playbooks. A lot of our customers work with playbooks. They either have their own or they work with us to create them. But most of them have a security operations center. They already have a whole team to make playbooks. They know exactly what to do. You can't just reboot the PLC when you get an alert. You can't shut down the safety controller. They know what to do. So we work with our customers' playbooks. We can take your playbooks, put them into our product through a different screen here. And then when an alert is generated, it could show you everything that you need to do, who to call, what the communication plan is, and who the asset owner is. So you can really tie this into your enterprise. In fact, you can automate all this as well. You see an attack and you don't even want to be involved with it. You can have the system integrated with your firewalls so that you can quarantine devices or stop attacks or stop communications. It's not very common to see the automation for blocking on the OT side, but it's possible. So you can see I've got a timeline of this particular alert right here. And I could come in and say, leave a note for another analyst. And then when he logs in, he can see my notes there. So let me get back to our alerts console here. And let's say I'm kind of not sure what to look at. I want to start with my network. So I'm going to pop up the network graph here. And this is a global view of those 2 labs that are put together, the communications. And first, before I zoom in to show you the details, you can see that there's some colors being used here. With more time, And with live machines, rather than just a packet capture, things that are gray will become other colors, greens, reds, blues. The reason they're gray is because I just ran traffic by it once and it didn't really see enough about it. Like it said, hey, there's a Windows ME machine, but it didn't have anything to log into to see if it was patched or what version of patches were installed, what service packs. So with time, this gets more intelligent. It'll start to label things better. It'll bring in the firmware versions, start to identify more and more details about the assets that you'll need. And I could slice and dice the data if I want to. I can search for IPs. If I just want to see all my Rockwell infrastructure, if I want to see just my HP or Windows, I can look for everything on level 1 of the Purdue model. I can go by VLAN, MAC address if I'm on a forensic investigation and we're like, hey, this machine doesn't even have an IP address. We need to hunt this and see where it's coming from. We can draw using just layer 2. We can go by zones, a lot of different ways to slice and dice the graph. And then we can start to zoom in here and see that these are directional arrows with labels showing the protocol that's in use. So you can imagine with a lot of assets, this can get very interesting. And a lot of times when we go and deploy this in a customer's environment and we start pulling this up and they start saying, hey, wait a minute, why is this talking to that? Why is that talking to this? These graphs are sometimes the most exciting part of our product for customers. I've seen them get lost in this for like days, just sticking on this one screen, tracing cables and opening up service help desk tickets and asking questions that should be asked. And this really exposes a lot of cool stuff, being able to see all the communications here. So, yes, sir. You can export these. You can save them. Yep. You can create a report as well that would like grab a piece of this and mix it in with a query from the system and add like a table and some pie charts with it. And so I can come into this guy right here, kind of curious about what all this is going on with him. Oh, if I can catch him. Yeah, it is. And now I've clicked on the overview and I can see what it looks like. Got some details about it. There's the firmware version, which I picked up passively just by watching traffic go by on the wire, which is important. There's a lot of products out there that may say they do anomaly detection or they may do network monitoring. They add the word OT to it. Ask them if they can tell you a firmware version, and they'll usually don't know what that means. They'll say, you mean on Windows? You mean on Linux or Cisco? And when it comes to being able to dig out firmware versions and the hardware modules and their positions on a backplane in a chassis for a group of PLCs like this card right here, this is not an all-in-one product. This needs to be in a chassis with other things around it. We are able to show all that, the positions, and each hardware module on that backplane has an independent firmware version that's different than the other ones. So we will show you each and every one, the firmware version of each one, its configuration. If you have like an ENBT in there or some other network card and you have 8 IP addresses on it, we will show you all 8 IP addresses, the firmware and the MAC address, and then any changes that have been made to it. And then let me get zoomed out here. My zoom is very odd. I'm supposed to have more to the right. So I'm just clicking through some details here. Let me do a time check here. Does anybody have a clock showing anywhere? Okay, thank you. Let me get back to one screen. All right. So when I get to my asset inventory, I want to dig through everything. First at the top is this dynamic menu. Depending on what I have, is what will be displayed up there. This makes it really quick to drill down. So let's say right now I'm troubleshooting something. Let's get out of our scenario for a second. We have a Rockwell or an Allen Bradley PLC that's acting funny or needs a patch or something. I have to find it. So rather than having to search or do anything, I can just come in here and this is automatically, because I have these, it's going to display those. And I can come over here and pick, yeah, I'm looking for this really old firmware right there. Now I automatically know exactly which devices out there have this level of firmware. and I can hunt these down. I can do anything I need from a management standpoint with this central cloud product. I can even rename it here, and it will propagate down to the factory level and rename it down there. So what you're seeing here isn't all that can be displayed. I can display a lot more information and look at things by like last activity time, operating system. We have lifecycle management in here. If it's end of life, we were able to tell you that that particular piece of hardware shouldn't be there. We're going to be working with at some point in the near future with software bill of materials and also prohibited vendors, countries that aren't allowed to manufacture product for other countries. We're going to be able to do that as well. So you'll see a lot of valuable information here in our alerts console. The asset inventory. And earlier I mentioned vulnerabilities. So let me jump to, sorry, I'm so used to working with a mouse that I'm a little slower with my touchpad. So I'm going to jump into Acme for a second because we mentioned vulnerabilities. I know I have a few vulnerabilities in my environment. A few was an understatement. You can see I have 9,750 here. That sounds like a lot, right? If you were a hacker, you wouldn't have a lot of hard work to do to find something to break into. Now, here's my sandbox. I have 25,499. And that's just in something I built out in like 2 days. Give me a team of people in 20, 30 years to build out a factory, I bet you I could beat that number by a lot. And but where do we start? If we wanted to harden our security posture, where would we begin? That's just way too much. I can't go in and ask for a budget to fix 25,000 things. They're going to say, you need some priority. Come back to me in a couple of days when you can make a pie chart or something. So I'll be back in 5 minutes. Here's where we start. We have what's called vulnerability workbooks. What it helps us do is get all of those vulnerabilities, take the CVE scoring, the severity of it, and then look at the role of that asset in the environment. Is this something that is, a thermostat on a wall, or is this a industrial controller that's, governing the process? Is this more critical than something that may not be? Is it actually used in OT or not? So we're basing a few different risk indicators on the data that we have. And as I said, the more data we get, the more accurate and the better this information will become. But it's hard for me to find an environment where I can't lower the risk by upgrading Windows. So I think I always get this first one. In fact, I think if we removed Windows, we could get a lot of risk out. Next, I could get a 2% gain by upgrading my control logics. Not a lot, but and there's some value in this. We don't push this because we all know that patching these PLCs isn't always going to help. The PLCs most of the time don't even have a username and password on it. If I fire up TO Portal or RS Logix or Studio 5000, I can connect to that PLC and I can write firmware and I can write code to it. I don't need to log into it. So why do I need a vulnerability? I don't have to hack it. There's no attack necessary. So patching PLCs is not really the end game of how to fix things. Monitoring is, because even a patched PLC is going to get tipped over if somebody gets past the firewall and they're on the network. I love the nods of agreement up there. I saw a couple out there. So hardening the environment around the PLCs is crucial. Can't always protect the OT assets. We know some of these run for 20, 30 years. 30 years ago, we weren't thinking about what people are doing today to attack stuff. And if we patch it today, in 30 years, they're going to be doing a whole different type of stuff that we haven't even thought about yet. So patching is important, but you can't just rely on that. It can't just be hardened. Even NIST SP800 environments that are governed to the end, to the max that you can go, have been broken into. So visibility and being able to see things and having an independent audit trail that is resilient to attack. Like you can't directly find us on the network. If you were to break in, you wouldn't know that we're listening because the span ports don't really indicate that you're being spanned. When you're attacking that FTP server, you don't know that there's something pulling that network traffic off, and there's this whole tier of technology and people that are watching what's going on and raising alarms and getting the right people involved. So by taking all of our existing Nozomi Networks infrastructure that we have in our customers' environments and getting out past that front door and bringing it up to the cloud as an overlay, but not requiring the cloud, gives everyone the most flexibility and allows us all to really work together and enables you to engage partners a lot better than before so that we can work through these things. And then the piece that I mentioned earlier is the automation that Vantage brings. That another challenge that we have, and we know our competitors do too, is sizing. That can be really hard when you're trying to ask for budget. How many pieces of hardware do you need? A lot of times when I get to a customer site and I ask, how many assets do you have? They say, well, that's why we brought you here. You're supposed to help us with this. You're supposed to tell me how many I have. You say, okay, well, what do you want to buy? And they're like, I don't know. So that's hard. So with Vantage, we can just say, well, start with this, and you just keep going, and it doesn't matter. You're buying based on how many assets you put into Vantage. So I don't care if you have 37 CMCs, 400 remote collectors, and 99 Guardians. It's the same price as if you bought just one Guardian and put it in there. So you have an unlimited flexibility because you can just keep deploying hardware in whichever 3, 1, 2 tier you want to go and expand horizontal or vertical anywhere you want to go. And that's going to enable you to work a lot better and get into areas that you wouldn't be able to, and work as a team a lot better. So I think I have one more slide I'm going to end on, and then let's just do some Q&A if you guys have any questions. I think we're getting low on time here. So what we're recommending today, if you're looking for deploying cybersecurity at the OT level, the industrial control level, is make sure that it's scalable. Everyone starts small, but when you start to scale out and up is when a lot of the doors start blowing off the different things out there. So make sure that the product is able to do that. If you're going to POC products, definitely run them through the ringers. There's so much out there already that doesn't really do what it says, and there's more and more companies trying to get into OT now. You have all the IT companies that are just adding OT on. They're taking the IT product and selling it in. And you deploy it, and you realize that it's not really doing what it said. It doesn't get into the protocols. Then there's products that do that, but they're not really scaling, or they're not able to do it all the time under all conditions. And you can expose these things with any kind of a technology in the POCs by really ramping up the volume of traffic you run at it, run more devices, and just throw a lot of complexity at it in the POC. I can't tell you how many times I've seen products in cybersecurity get deployed and then ripped out because it performed well in the POC but didn't perform well in production. Not to say Nozomi, not my company now, but other companies and I've worked with and other cybersecurity products is one of our main problems in our industry is not doing so well in production when we do great. We can catch all the attacks in the POC, but then the volume of the traffic is what causes either the hardware to fail or the software. So make sure that whatever you're looking at is scalable because you're going to grow, your company's going to grow, and if the product is successful, you originally thought you were going to just work in that little tiny scope. Like everything, when it's a success, it's going to expand out. More and more people are going to want to do it. They're going to say, hey, can you cook toast with that? Can you, drive my kid to school with that? Can you do this? Can you do that? And you start getting that scope creep, and you're going to start to need that scale. And then being able to deploy it, this is crucial. If you can't deploy it easily, then you're not going to be able to get it into the places where you need to monitor. And if you do, you're not going to be able to run it very well. So you need it to be sustainable. Also, always on monitoring. You don't want to have to configure it for each and every protocol. You don't want to have to know everything about your environment so you can pre-configure the device. You want it to be fully automated and do its thing. And then finally, a full stack solution. We, in our product, have a full stack, meaning we compile our code, we write it, it's compiled C code, it's on hardware that is our label. We take 100% full responsibility for everything top to bottom. We're not going to sell you software and then tell you to go buy a Dell server and go buy something from here and something from there and try to make it all work. We do everything. We take ownership over the whole stack. And that includes from the remote collector all the way up to the cloud. So let me stop there and open it up for questions, comments. Everybody's ready to sign the... We have a salesperson right here with a stack of POs ready to roll. Yes. Yes, great question. So I did delete the slide that pats us on the back about all of our industries that we're in and everything. It was too salesy for my style. But yeah, we're in like 9 of the top 10 oil and gas. Like, I don't remember all the statistics. I believe that Gray or just, he stepped out, yeah. They would be able to cite that off the top of their head. But we work in pretty much every sector, from the defense industrial base. We work with the military stuff. We're working with aircraft, bases, vehicles, ships, auto manufacturers, drug manufacturers, water production. Pretty much every sector. I could just keep naming stuff off here. We have a couple thousand companies that are our customers right now. Yep. Anything else? Everybody ready? We have a certification program. Since you guys are up to speed on Vantage now, you can take the test and be certified. Yep. Well, thank you guys. Oh, I'm sorry. For the individual, it's NNCE. It's a Nozomi Network Certified Engineer, and it'll add at least 2 zeros to your salary, I hope. Yeah. Yes, sir.
On one of the pages back, we have recommendation use the vulnerability to be upgraded. I hear what you're saying in terms of presenting so much of the trusted recommendations and further. Is that something you're going to be building up more, or is that the union still relying on to make that those recommendations?
So currently, on the IT side, there's a lot more. They're less risk averse, and they're willing to just automate something like using Puppet or Chef and just roll out a bunch of patches and just go home and go to sleep while your servers are being updated. We don't get that as much on the OT side. We do have what our customers have been asking us for, which is the ability to tell a firewall to shut that down or kick that guy off the network or destroy this connection. But we haven't been asked a lot to interact with the systems themselves and do any tampering with updating or remediating vulnerabilities. But as far as identifying them, we're adding a lot more. We have been adding more. It's not just a matter of loading up the CVEs. There's a lot of them. We also do our own research. We find a lot of these vulnerabilities. We are an official naming authority for the vulnerabilities that are in that database. So there's that piece of it, but there's also what data can we get to help us better identify vulnerabilities piece. So you can run an IT product and it'll tell you you have 50 vulnerabilities on this device, but then our product will tell you you only have 17 because we know that the way it was configured, you don't have those other vulnerabilities. So those improvements are things that we continue to do to make it easier for the operators to not have a screen full of false positives. Yeah, and potential vulnerabilities. We're pretty accurate with ours. Great. Well, thank you everyone for attending, and appreciate it, your time.